People who purchase your app may have automatic updates turned on, and when you release an update to your app, unless they visit the App Store, they won't know what feature enhancements or fixes have occurred in your app. Hi, my name is Stewart Lynch, and in this video, I'm going to show you how you can create a What's New screen that you can present to your users whenever a new build or version of your app is released. We'll use the new App Storage Property Wrapper in iOS 14 to save the current version in UserDefaults so that the screen will not be presented again until the version changes. If this is something you want to learn, then keep watching. So here's the app that we're going to build. The app has just been installed by the user, so on first launch, she's presented with a screen that shows the history of development. Note that there have been two releases. The initial 1.0 release, followed by the 1.1 bug fix. If I exit this app and relaunch again, the screen is no longer presented. In fact, it won't be again until you, as the developer, submit a new build and update the information to be displayed. As an option, however, you can provide your users with a button like this that will display the content on demand. That's up to you. The solution that we're about to build is generic and works well in both light and dark mode. Now that you have an idea of what we want to create, let's get started. Since this tutorial uses features that are available in iOS 14 only, you must be using Xcode 12 or later. The starter project can be downloaded from the link in the description below. All it has is the content view that displays an image that is found in our Assets folder, and the navigation bar has a button that has yet to have an action defined. The button will allow us to test our What's New screen presentation before we create the function that will do it only when the version is new. For each new version, I'd like to add a row in my display that shows the version number, a title for the version, and a description. So let's create our model for that. Start by creating a new Swift file called What's New item. Inside that file, we'll create a new struct of the same name that conforms to the identifiable protocol, and we need this because we're going to use it in a list view. We need to create an ID property so we can simply assign it the UUID. And we'll need three properties for the three items that I just mentioned. So a double for the version number and strings for version title and description. Now, we also want to follow best or suggested practice here by using an Mvvm architecture. So we'll create another Swift file, and this time we'll call it What's New View Model. Our view model is going to be a struct of the same name, and initially here with three properties: a title string and an intro, which is also a string. As well, we'll have an array of the What's New item, and these can all be constants as they are all created on initiation and they won't change. Now, to make it easy for me to add new items to our array each time that I update my app, I'm going to create a static function called buildWhat'sNew that will return an instance of the What's New view model. As a static function, it means that we reference it not as an instance of the struct, but rather on the struct itself. With that function, let's create an instance of that view model, initializing it with a title and some intro text and an empty array of What's New items. And then we can return this instance. Now, each time I have a new version, I'll need to add a What's New item to the array. So let's create one for the initial release. We can use the What's New item structs initializer for this. First, I'll separate each property with a return, and I'll start with 1.0, the title initial release, and for the description, I'll be using Swift's capability of multi-line strings by starting with 3 quotes, pressing return, and entering the trailing 3 quotes. Now, between these quotes, I can add some multi-line text entry that will tell our users what's in this version. When I stop typing, I get an error about insufficient indentation, so I have to move the trailing quotes to the beginning of the line. With this in place, we're now ready to create our What's New view. Our What's New view is going to be presented as a modal sheet from our content view. We can let our modal view create the instance of our view model when it's instantiated. So let's create a new SwiftUI file called What's New. At the top of the struct, we can create an instance of the What's New view model by calling our static function. We use the struct name to access the function that will return an instance of the struct's view model with the properties already entered. Let me bring up an image of what our final view will look like to help us create this new SwiftUI view. We see that we're going to have a navigation view on our modal with a button that will dismiss the modal. Now, I know that we can just drag the sheet down to dismiss it, but for those new users that are not aware of this, I like to also provide a button. First, let's embed our text view, which we'll be replacing shortly, inside a navigation view. We'll add a navigation title, What's New, and also add a trailing navigation bar item. The trailing view will be a button and an action that we'll fill in just a minute. For the label, I'll use the text view with an X emoji that is assigned the size of a large title. In SwiftUI, when a view is presented by another view, whether that be a sheet or a navigation link, an environment variable with the key path presentation mode is initiated, and when it's presented, it sets its isPresented boolean to true. So we can assign this to a variable of the same name. Then, to set the property false and dismiss our view, we can call the dismiss function on the wrapped value of our presentation mode variable. And we'll do this in our button action. To test this out, return to Content View, and we'll add a state variable so that we can trigger the presentation of this sheet and initialize it with false. Let's just call it Show What's New. Next, we'll add a sheet to the navigation view that binds Show What's New to the isPresented, and the content will be our What's New view. Now we can complete our trailing navigation bar's button action to set the state variable to true when tapped. We can test this out in our preview. Tapping on the Info button in the navigation bar presents our modal, and from that modal we can either drag down to dismiss or tap the Close button. Great. So let's finish off designing our What's New item view. I'm going to replace the text view with a list view, and the first row will be a VStack that will contain a text view displaying the view model's title, set to a title font, followed by another text view showing the view model's intro property. Now, if I hold down Control and Option and click on the VStack, I have access to the Property Inspector, where I can set its alignment to leading. Now, this VStack will be followed by our list of What's New items from our view model, so we can use a for each loop for this. Item will be each one of our What's New items, and we can iterate over that using a VStack to present the version title and description of each. For the version, I'll start with the word version, and then to display the double value of the version number, I can convert the double to a string using string interpolation, with a specifier that will show 2 decimal places. And I can set the font size to caption and give it a font weight of bold. For the version title, another text view, and I'll just use a headline font. And finally, the item description in another text view. I'll Control-Option-click once more on this VStack, and I'll set the alignment to leading and give it a space of 3. Now I also want to do one more thing, and that's to use the Inset group list style for our list. We can return now to our content view and test it out once more. On demand, when I tap our navigation bar button, our What's New screen is presented. Now we may want to keep this option of being able to present the What's New screen on demand, but we also want to be able to force this to be displayed only when the version has changed. Let's return to our What's New view model and add a new property. I'm going to use the new app storage property wrapper that was introduced in iOS 14 that saves and reads from UserDefaults. We'll first have to change the import on our file to SwiftUI to be able to use the app storage property wrapper. I'll use the key last version and define a static variable last version initialized as an empty string. Now how can we record the version of our app? If we go to our app target, we see that there are two fields, version and build. Both of these values are available through the bundle.main info dictionary. These fields update our info.plist. So if we open our info.plist as source, we'll see that one is cfbundle short version string and the other is cfbundle version. Knowing this, we can create a static string property that will combine these two strings and write it to our last version key in UserDefaults using our app storage property wrapper. So let's start by creating that var string as a computed string property. Now for the version number, let's assign it to a constant app version like this. Now, assuming that we typed our key value correctly, we can safely force unwrap it and assign it as a string. For our build, we can just copy this and change the constant to app build and the dictionary key to cfbundle version. And finally, we can return a concatenated version of these two values like this. With that done, we can create one more static function in our struct that will check to see if the last version stored in our UserDefaults matches the current app version. And then we'll use this knowledge to determine if we need to show our screen. So we'll return an appropriate Boolean value. Within that function, we do our check. If the stored last version from UserDefaults is not the same as the one found in our bundle, then we must update it and write back to UserDefaults with the new version. This is a function of the app storage property wrapper. Then we can return true because we want to show our screen. Else, because the versions matched, nothing has changed, therefore we return false. Now we have everything we need. Back in Content View, we can call onAppear on our navigation view. And in the body of this function, we can assign the Boolean returned from the static function that we just created to the state variable showWhat'sNew. This means that if our last version is changed, we will be shown our sheet. In order to see this, let's run it in a simulator. On first launch, the What's New screen is presented. I'm going to stop and run it again. This time the What's New sheet is no longer presented. Of course, if we want, we can tap the navigation bar button to have it presented at any time on demand. Now let's say we fix some bugs and we need to submit an update to the App Store. In this case, then we need to do two things. First, we need to change the app version number. So let's assign it the version 1.1. Next, we'll need to add a new What's New item to our array in our view model in that static function. I'll just copy from the first version and paste it as the second item in our array. And I'll change the version number to 1.1 to match what we just set. And for the title, I can use another emoji of a bug, and let's say it's bug fixes. And then I can just add some description detail of what our bug fixes are. Now before I run it, I want to do one more thing. If I ran this as is, our latest update would be shown after the initial 1.0 release information. Now I could reverse these items in the array, but that would make adding items in the future more cumbersome. Instead, I can return to our WhatsNew view and in our for each loop, add the reversed function on our array. Running this one more time, we see that our WhatsNew view is again presented, and note that it also looks good in light and dark mode. If I run it one more time, the screen's no longer presented. You have all you need now to add these to your own projects. Now, you may have some existing SwiftUI or UIKit projects that you'd like to add this functionality, but they're not running on iOS 14, so what I've shown you here won't work for you. Well, the good news is that I have created a Swift package for each of those. One for UIKit and one for SwiftUI. Both are very similar to this solution, and you can find instructions for adding the package to your projects on my GitHub pages. I'll provide links to these in the description below. I have lots of other videos available and in the queue as well, so please check out the rest of my channel. You can also visit my website to see the apps that I have available on the App Store, and visit my GitHub page to see what I have available as public repositories. If you like what you've seen, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And ring the bell to get notified when I post new videos. I'm most active on Twitter, so please follow me there as well to find out what else I'm up to. Thanks for watching.